Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our panel on how GenAI is rewriting the developer experience. I'm Mira. I'm a PM here at Auth0, and I'm joined today with a bunch of the leading voices in GenAI right now. So I'd love if everyone could just go around, give a quick intro with your name, role, company, and maybe one AI tool that you found surprising or maybe slightly concerning.
Hey everybody, my name is Gaspar, and I lead AI research at Vercel as part of the V0 team. And one AI tool that I've really enjoyed recently is Granola for summarizing all the meetings that we're in. I think it's just been actually a big step up in my personal productivity, not related to dev tools, but we'll get into those a little bit later.
Sounds delicious.
Hi, everybody. I'm Laurie, Head of Developer Relations at LlamaIndex. An AI tool that I'm using a whole lot is a tiny little agent that I wrote myself. And what it does is it looks up the social media handles of companies that we are about to mention in a tweet, and it automatically inserts them into our tweets before they go out, which saves me like 10 minutes every time I do it. And I use it 3 times a day, and it just saves me hours and hours and hours in aggregate.
Does it use LlamaIndex?
Yes, of course it does.
Wow. Love to see it.
Hi, I'm Nunu. I'm founding engineer at LangChain. I really like Granola as well, but I think I'm going to go with ChatGPT. It's just the boring choice, but I'm always surprised with how much you can actually achieve in that simple UI.
Yeah, I have not heard of Granola before, but watch out, my next meeting. All right. Thank you for those intros. Also, if you have any questions throughout this session, please feel free to drop them in chat. We'll try to address them at the end. But let's jump into it. So, Laurie, I want to start off with a kind of big picture view. In your opinion, how do you think GenAI is changing the way that developers are interacting with tools and software? It's a very broad question.
Well, it's kind of a pet subject for me. For years now, I've been saying that there's this myth of the full stack developer, when really programming is always like this layer cake of abstractions, and we're always piling more abstractions on top of it. And so I think of GenAI as just a new layer of abstraction. So there's programming, which has always been like this structured way of thinking that turns a problem into a repeatable solution. And until now, the way that you expressed that solution was you had to write code to do it. But now you can express your solution in language, and the code is abstracted away, which I think is very exciting.
Agreed. I'm wondering, maybe if you have an opinion, do you think we're still in the experimentation phase with all of these AI things, or are we seeing a shift to more in production workflows?
I think there's a lot of both. I think it really depends on what kinds of, companies you're looking at. I think in the enterprise, it's still very much experimentation and not really putting things in production. But we are starting to see glimpses of real applications in production being super useful.
Do you see any blockers or reasons why enterprises are slower to adopt?
I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done that's going to be like industry specific, and that work just hasn't happened yet. Like, how do you fit it with the current workflows of each different role and person? I think that's still to be done.
Totally. Makes sense. All right, Gaspar, as someone who's leading a very developer-forward, experience-forward company like Vercel, how do you think GenAI shifts the expectations that developers have for their tools?
I thought about this. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I think back to like the first moment that we saw a glimpse of how Copilot could affect the developer experience when it just knew how to complete a function. And as we continue iterating and as LLMs get better, one of the things is no longer the autocomplete, but it's the ability to build a full app, a full feature on its own. And doing that is still hard for a lot of tools, especially building new technology. I think that the way that we do that as the builders of developer tools is we try to create abstractions that the GenAI can use. So for example, making it easier to deploy an app by building the deployment platform. Those are tools that the model is able to use. And so as the way that I view the expectation increasing or changing for developers is in that we now are looking for bigger features, bigger things to implement, and also as for the people making the developer tools, we need to be the other end. We need to make it such that the AI can actually use these features and build these features that the AI will be able to use.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Also, everyone else, feel free to jump in. I'm asking targeted questions, but anything goes. But my next question is for Nuno. We hear a lot about what AI can do, and we can do all these cool things. There are a lot of promises with productivity gains around AI, but do you think this is real? Are we seeing this in practice?
I think it depends on the use case. I think we're seeing it for coding for sure. I actually think we're starting to see it a lot more with these longer horizon agents like Codex from OpenAI, I guess Devin, Jules from Google, where you can actually task them with something that they're going to be busy with for like 30 minutes or something, which means you can actually do that 5 times and have an agent doing 5 things on your behalf at the same time. I think that's going to be the real unlock. Much more than just, obviously Copilot in your code editor helps speed things up here and there, but I think just this parallelism is really what's going to make a big difference.
Yeah, I love, somebody asked me a question, I put ChatGPT deep research, and then I'm like, I'll get back to you.
Exactly.
So I see it.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, I think there is one, for me, that I've seen a very clear productivity gain with code is the ability to hook up different pieces together as it relates to integrations. Mm-hmm. So, for example, as a software developer, pre AI software developer here, we used to have to read documentation, to understand how to build features and how to integrate features, and we still do, but it's a lot simpler now. And now AI can fill in the gaps that the integrations were originally supposed to fill. There's good integrations, fit in nicely. They're very easy to plug in. Sometimes there's some difficulties, and so AI has really helped in filling in those gaps and providing that extra knowledge to integrate that extra piece of software you needed.
That's interesting. That ties into another thing I've been thinking about is how does AI change the way that we are thinking about documentation and learning as developers?
Yeah, I mean, at Vercel, we're constantly building developer tools, and before we used to have examples where here's an example of how to use this technology. Here's the API. Now here's a link to V0 and go test it out.
Right.
And we tried to do that before without AI, which again, it was like an install script. But now it's just so much more democratic, where somebody can just go in and not even need terminal access and deploy this on the web. I think that's like where that's how documentation is evolving, in that it becomes more educational in the sense of like you're playing with it a lot sooner. You're understanding how these features can integrate into your product a lot sooner than before, when you had to read and understand to see if this is even compatible at first.
Right.
So yeah, I think like AI is it's a lot more show instead of telling. And I think that's what's exciting for me.
Yeah, I think it's also been a discussion, at least with my team, like how do we create documentation that LLMs can read instead of only humans? So that's been interesting to explore.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of adoption of LLMs.txt.
Yes, right.
As a core way of publishing documentation, and it's changed the way that we write documentation. Because we used to focus on like, here is a step-by-step guide to how you would do this. And now that's not really necessary, because your LLM is going to do the step-by-step part. What you need is a higher level vision of, how does this fit into your larger application? What does it do? What is it for? So there's a lot more what and why and a lot less how.
Yeah.
The other parts of that, which is pretty cool, this was a problem before, and like we kind of solved this issue with AI, which is hallucinations, right? Like you have a new API and the LLM doesn't know how to use it, and it hallucinates an API. That actually becomes a really useful tool for developing APIs that are AI friendly, surprisingly. So you want to actually prompt the AI and say like, okay, like what kind of API would be useful here, and like what is natural for LLM? Because at the end of the day, the LLM is just a, it is like a representation of what us developers have created over, these many years. So there is some inherent taste to like the API. Obviously, you still have to, massage it a little bit, but yeah, that's another area I think where like even like before the documentation, the development of the tools and the APIs are actually, more AI friendly now.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I thought you were going to say that we've solved the issue of hallucination.
Oh, no, I mean, we solved it a little.
I missed
It's
the
definitely a
memo.
little bit easier to solve.
But yeah, for sure. Nuno, as founding engineer at LangChain, you've helped shape this platform that allows you to chain together LLMs and tools. And I'm really curious about what are some of the early design decisions that you made early on to help make this developer friendly?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's maybe two big things that we found are really helpful. We started with the original LangChain library, which was all about having these pre-built popular architectures that everyone could use, like in a single line of code. And that proved to be very popular. It's a great place for people to start. But I think what we found is some people want to kind of graduate from that into customizing it and writing their own more custom architecture. And that's where we solve that with LangGraph, which gives you those like building blocks that you can assemble. And this really was just us observing, the kinds of issues that people are posting about and the kinds of things that people were trying to do. But both continue to be super helpful.
Yeah, different levels of experience catering to different audiences.
Exactly.
That was a tough question. Laurie, how do you see the role of AI evolving in terms of enhancing developer productivity and creativity within the software development lifecycle, based on what you're seeing in your position as DevRel?
Obviously, there's just a huge leap forward in productivity, I think. Like I was saying earlier, the ability to turn code into an abstraction that you don't need to think about is a really interesting change. It's going to, I think, unlock a new kind of developer who has the sort of structured thinking of a programmer, but doesn't necessarily care about what the syntax is or even what language they're working in. They're just like, I have a problem, I have figured out how to solve it, and it is the computer's job to write it down.
Yeah, I mean, half the time when I'm doing it, I even haven't figured out how to solve it. Like, solve it too.
Yeah, to add to that, we have a designer on our team, and he was a huge fan of V0, very early on, because he was able to take his designs or his ideas and have them get generated into working UI and a working application. So I thought that was just a natural thing, and I didn't think much of it at first as a developer. I was like, it's just making it a lot faster for me to do things. But it turns out that it was a much larger impact for him, because as a designer, you had to depend on somebody else to go and implement this stuff for you. And so, like, to add to that part of like unlocking, it's actually really huge for these people, for this segment of folks that a lot of times had to depend on someone else to implement their ideas. But then even then, they often were met with, that's not possible. We can't do that. Like, technically, like it won't work. Now they can just go and do it. And like, hey, it does work. It is possible. Those animations, we can make them. And so I think that's just like a really huge like shift. And you now have much, as a developer, you have a lot more teammates, that you can depend on, you can rely on to come with you, not just with ideas, but with solutions as well. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I love the analogy of teammates.
I also think it's really interesting that it can go the other way. As a longtime developer with no sense of style, I find it very useful to have put together the skeleton of an app, and then I just ask the LLM, like, could you make this, less ugly, please? Could you add some CSS and make this, it's not solving, fundamental UX issues, but it can make it look pretty in a way that I can't do by myself.
Yeah, no, it's also so satisfying to see it spin up, and you're like, wow, it's a beautiful thing right in front of me. Yeah,
That's so true.
great. Yeah. All right, Nuno, I have a question for you that I'm a little biased on because I'm at Auth0, but how do you handle security when it comes to AI-driven systems?
Yeah, I think it's first of all, I think it's an open question. I think a lot of people are thinking about that. I think the current default way to think about it is you have the agent kind of take on the identity of the user that triggered the agent. And I think that actually works fairly well for agents that take between seconds and a few minutes to run. But as we get to these longer horizon agents that maybe are running for like an hour or two, I think that starts to make less sense. And we really should start thinking about giving agents some kind of identity that's unique to them, and can inherit some permissions from the user that called them, but is somehow distinct.
Right. It's interesting how our definition of user changes when agents enter the picture.
Yeah, I also think it's going to require rethinking the granularity of permission models. Like, do you have write access? Yes, no, becomes, do you have write access, to this volume? Are you allowed to delete the whole thing? Are you allowed to make minor changes? Are you, the agent has different, you trust the agent to a different degree than you trust yourself. So just read write, I feel like, is no longer appropriate. And there's lots of other permission levels that need to get more subtle than they are right now.
Yeah, that's great. Gaspar, I asked you earlier how you think GenAI is changing the way we think about documentation. I'm also curious how you think it's changing the way we think about infrastructure, so like observability.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm biased because I work at Vercel, and we're the frameworks company. And so the reason I really like this question, this positioning, is because I view it as like agents operate really well when you give them a framework, when you give them the right constraints. And we don't need to worry so much about how the infrastructure is created as much as the agent just needs to write one file, one route, and the infrastructure is just provisioned on its own. And so I think that the way that I view how agents are going to function with and collaborate with people is by making it easier for these small units of compute and infrastructure to be to spin up. It's going to be super important, not just for to be able to finish tasks, but also for the security question about, okay, how do you ensure that this particular agent and this compute only has access to this X data? And so I view it as okay, how do we create a language that the agent can understand, which says, here's a task that I want to complete, submit your request, and then everything else is taken care of. And that's sort of the way I view it. And so I like the idea of making the infrastructure, building infrastructure such that these small composable parts can be provided as more tools for the agents in a really easy way.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Laurie, question for you. So RAG has evolved a lot in the past couple of years. We went from, add this document, like this little table over here in your prompt, to all these structured multi-hop approaches.
Mhm.
As someone who works at LlamaIndex, how have you seen RAG architectures evolve into what they are today, and what do you think are the challenges ahead?
I love that question because I spend all of my time thinking about it. The biggest change we've seen in 2025 is obviously the shift to agentic approaches. What we would call, one-shot or naive RAG has been sort of widely recognized as just not enough. And instead, RAG, the ability to retrieve and augment what you're doing remains fundamental, but it becomes just one other tool that this agent can use. Agents can get really smart. They can do, as you said, they can do multi-hop approaches. They can retry. They can reflect on their own results. They can rephrase their questions. But no matter how smart they get, you still fundamentally need real-time access to your data that your LLMs were not trained on and you can't train your LLM in real time. So in some ways, RAG is, here to stay, but in other ways, the thing that you think of as RAG is now a much more complex beast. It's an agentic approach that is, using RAG plus structured queries plus other kinds of tools to answer questions.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think RAG is something that seems simpler, like at its core, like you're just adding some data, but it's crazy how deep you can go.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically like, do we think databases are here to stay? Yes, I think databases are here to stay.
You sure? Nuno, do you think we are moving towards a world where devs can just describe their intent and then have tools just spin up, a solution? Or is that something that's a fantasy far off?
I think one of the hardest things to do as a developer has always been to figure out what to build, and what constraints to respect and what constraints to do away with. And at least so far, I don't think the coding agents help you that much with that. I think maybe one thing we will see is more of the developer time actually spent at that higher level of deciding what to build, what is the best solution for the all the requirements that come from product, from design, from talking to the users, and maybe less a smaller percentage of time spent on actual typing out words in your favorite language.
Yeah, maybe when we have enough agents, enough RAG one day, you could just say like, this is my intent.
I think there's a fundamental point there, which I make a lot, which is that LLMs are good at turning lots of text into less text. Fundamentally, that's what they're good at. So I feel like any AI application, any LLM application would ask me to turn a sentence into a paragraph is going to fail. Like there's just not enough data there for the LLM to work on. Like just saying, build me an app, build me a chat app. The LLM's like, sure, I have built you a thing that is a chat app. It might not be what you wanted at all. Like you haven't given me enough information to be precise about what it is I should be building.
That's crazy because I just asked it to write me a blog post and it looked pretty good. Might have to fix it a lot.
Yeah, you know that there's like this joke internally that we say like, oh, we want to make sure we're all aligned before we get started.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's the problem with LLMs, right? It's like they're not aligned when you get started.
All
right?
askew.
Everything's askew. Everything is different. Everything has different optimizations for why it's completing certain tasks. And so I think that we will see the ability to take this intent and turn it into a full product and a full company maybe in the future pretty soon. But yeah, we definitely have to solve that problem of alignment. Like, how do you make sure that as the LLM, as the agents are working, that they're actually completing the tasks that you want them to complete? And the other side is that LLMs is at least historically recently they've been good at solving specific tasks, but not creating new solutions for they're not going to go out here and detect that like, oh, I've been doing this inefficiently for the last million runs. I should build a better solution for this. That still has to come from a person, but that's maybe just because we haven't integrated and haven't aligned the right agents in the right way. So I think that could be like the next step. It's like, okay, how do we bring agents closer to the decisions, bring that observability closer to those agents, and give them some orchestration power as well. It's obviously we have to solve all the other problems, the small technical problems of RAG, of orchestration for individual agents, but I think that's kind of like where we should go.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think, was it you or Lori that brought up the analogy of teammates?
But both of us.
Yeah, both of you.
Yeah,
but you got to align your teammates, right?
Yeah.
Before you make something worthwhile. So it makes a lot of sense. I'm curious. So now looking ahead, Gaspar, are there any blind spots or risks that you think are present in the way we're approaching GenAI right now that people aren't talking about enough?
Yeah, I mean, specifically for development of software, I think that quality is one of those things that is always tough to gauge. Building I think back to when we first started using AI and in development, and we started seeing an increase in Axios, for example. Like if right, it's like
Can't get it to stop
yeah,
using Axios.
it's like we were over it. Like we were past that already, and then AI came and brought it back.
Oh wait,
Yeah.
The only reason I know what this is because it's in a lot of error messages.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. And so
Yeah.
as an industry, as a small scale, as a team, you're gonna have bugs that pop up. As an industry, if the LLMs that out there are sort of have a bias towards certain libraries or certain architecture patterns, we're probably gonna have some issues. But I think that the solution there is more agents, right? It eventually is just more agents that are tasked with evaluating the outputs here and making sure that these outputs are conforming to certain rules. That's like, and one of those rules could be no Axios. Not to talk about Axios, but we have fetch now.
Right. More teammates.
Yeah.
More
I don't know
headcount.
if you guys have any.
Yeah. Do either of you have any thoughts there?
Oh yeah, I think to your point, I think one of the risks that I see is a fossilization, like to the Axios example, a fossilization of what libraries and what tools we use, because that is what the LLMs have seen a lot of, and so that's what they're trained on. And so if we're not thinking about it, if we're just saying build me this thing, they will use that thing, and we won't necessarily upgrade. As the web platform advances, it won't necessarily know that it can do that. So I think that's definitely something that we're going to have to work on. Like, how do we train LLMs to know that there are newer technologies they can use than what they saw in the majority of their training data?
Right. And at some point it becomes counterintuitive to just like keep putting more guidelines instead of just writing it from scratch, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Any thoughts there, Nuno?
I think it's obviously, in code, that's one way it manifests is Axios. I think in general, because of the way LLMs are constructed, we'll definitely have kind of an innate bias towards, I don't know what to call it, the path of least resistance, or like whatever the average way of doing something is. That's going to be the most common solution to problems, and in some cases that will happen to be the correct solution, but in other cases that will probably not happen to coincide with the right solution. And I think if we don't pay attention to that, we'll just, as you said, see a lot of movement towards something that's not actually useful.
Great. Makes sense. Reminder to the chat, if you have questions, drop them now. We'll address them very soon. Next question for Nuno. What part of the dev experience do you think will be completely reimagined by AI in the next few years?
I think as we have more of these longer running agents that you spawn multiple of at the same time, I think we're creating kind of a gap between our ability to launch agents and our ability to review their work. I think this will happen for all kinds of agents, but just in coding agents, for instance, it's the same. It's not possible for us to write all the code that Codex could write for me in the same amount of time, but it's actually also not possible for me to review all the code that Codex is able to write in that amount of time. So I think we're definitely going to need new ways of reviewing code and reviewing the work done by LLMs in general.
Do you think that's more? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lori.
I was just going to say code review agents. We'll just pile more agents on top of
Right,
agents.
more agents.
We'll fix everything.
I don't know if that's the only solution needed, but
I was going to ask if it's a question of specialization, because we see a lot of like more horizontal things like ChatGPT and like coding agents, but reviewing agents, things like that, it seems more niche and scaled down.
Yeah, and I actually think it's very task specific too. So I don't think there'll be a single solution for all tasks. For instance, I think someone will come up with some better way of reviewing code, which I think
could be you. You're out there.
Exactly, could be someone in the office, which will be, I think, part agent and part human. Right, it's just figuring out which parts does the human actually need to review, and which parts they don't.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a big thing in security as well. Like human in the loop is a constant conversation that we're having. Lori, what are you most excited about building or seeing others build with GenAI this year?
The thing that I'm most excited about is seeing a lot of agents get into production. Nuno was saying earlier that enterprises have been kind of hesitant about this, about diving in, and we are seeing. We agree. We are seeing the beginnings of people actually going, no, we've moved beyond a proof of concept. This is actually going to be good. But I'm especially interested in seeing use cases where the answer is not a chatbot. There's a huge surface area for automation where the LLM just lives under the hood and it's taking messy inputs and it's plugging them into existing software systems, and it's just making those software systems better without a chatbot or a chat box suddenly appearing as part of your UI. And I'm really excited to see those happen.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think for me, it's about how do we get V0 to go beyond the initial generation and the small app to maintaining a code base and maintaining a large app. And so going there is what I'm excited about, because that will actually integrate across your entire workflow and do a lot of the work that people just don't want to work on, right? This involves things like migrations for old versions to new versions, being able to scan for vulnerabilities and have promote fixes. Also being able to catch regressions in production data and tie that back to specific changes in code. Those are the types of things that I'm really excited about, and because that will unlock the actual one person builder to be able to run a full scale app and have a whole agent team with them. Whereas right now it just feels like a pair programmer. This is going to feel like a team. And that's kind of like what I'm excited for.
Cool. I'm sensing a theme here. Just like more agents, more team members, and we're good. That's the future. I love it. All right. So I'm looking at the chat right now. I think we have one question. If AI starts designing smarter versions of itself, is that evolution, or are we handing the future to something we truly don't understand? Or sorry, we don't truly understand. I know, it's a big one.
Anyone?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the right constraints, it's not evolution, right? I don't want this thing walking around. Not yet, maybe, but I think of that sort of like at a high level, or like very futuristic level. It takes me to those Avengers movies where Tony Stark is talking to Jarvis and he's able to move things around and completely interact in his house, in his environment, and build new tools like alone. I think like scope to like being able to build new tools, being able to be an assistant. I think that's really cool. I think it's possible that it does get to that point, although that will take a lot of compute. Yeah, but I think more concretely, short term, that is an area where the human in the loop is still going to be present for a long time, in my opinion.
So just don't give it arms, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. You don't want to. It's like when a kid is, when you have a kid, you have to make sure that kid's safe, the house.
Right.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts there?
I think the aspect of that I find non-scary is letting LLMs self-correct. Anthropic did a post recently where they were talking about how they build multi-agent systems, and one of the most interesting parts of that post that I thought was they gave their agent a set of tools, and when the agent used the tool incorrectly, it was allowed to write to a file saying, this is what I was expecting to happen, and this is what had happened instead. And so the next time it used the tool, it would read that description in addition to the existing tool description, and it would use the tool better.
Interesting.
Which is a very concrete today thing that you can do with tool use, where the LLM upgrades itself.
Right. Yeah. I think there's a paper that came out recently by Apple. I haven't read it, but it was about reasoning models and whether they're actually reasoning or they're just remembering. And I think, interestingly, that's like a interesting way that AI can simulate learning and evolving, but is it actually?
Yeah, there's a whole group of folks, like a whole subject which I haven't like delved I'm the AI, no, delve too deeply in, which is there's like a self like not correcting, but like self evolving neural nets. It's like where the neural net actually evolves its structure. Not successful yet, but that's another area which is like completely out of this world, futuristic type of maybe the next breakthrough. But yeah, there's that option as well, where like the actual way that the LLM is built can actually be evolved. I think that's another kind of interesting area.
Yeah, great. Okay, we have one more question. What niches are there for an aspiring open source dev to contribute, like around AI ML tooling for other devs, whether that's improving AI workflow or something with AI that isn't just a chatbot?
I think there's a big opportunity right now with all of the excitement around MCP.
Oh, yeah.
For those who aren't familiar, MCP is Model Context Protocol. It's a way of building tools that agents can use. And the surface area is every API that currently exists. You could build an MCP for it. And it's not just exposing the API as an MCP server. You have to think about how would an AI use these tools? What context would it need? What prompts would it need to understand? Like there is some thought and care that needs to go into designing a good MCP server. And I think that's a lot of low-hanging fruit right now, is wrapping MCP around the existing ecosystem.
Yeah. I actually was testing something and I was asking I don't know if it's ChatGPT, like what is MCP? And it told me something that was not Model Context Protocol, and I felt like betrayed. It's like, what do you mean you don't know?
Yeah. Here at Vercel, we also, we're huge on open source, and one of the things that we build is the AI SDK. And yeah, it's open source, feel free to contribute. It's a suite of tools to develop and work with AI agents and applications. One of the and there's different ways to contribute too. A lot of it is actually just building good streaming patterns, making good composable code, things that you wouldn't even associate with AI really, are naturally like, AI calls. These are open source tools that are used to actually work with AI. Yeah, and there's a whole suite of cool problems there that the team is solving, and especially with respect to building AI agents as well.
Awesome. All right, I think that is our last audience question. Let me double check. All right. Okay, to close this, last question, rapid fire. If you could build one dream AI-powered dev tool with no limits, what would it do? For me, I think like Jarvis would be pretty sick. I'd love that.
With no limits at all?
No limits at all. As much compute.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, the Jarvis would be the no limit one. I think that what I really like about that analogy is that Jarvis kind of, can just create new things on the fly, right? So where you're able to, where you need, you need like this specific view of this data that you have, and you need it instantly. So being able to generate new, I don't want to say apps, but new content really quickly, really fast, and really with really high fidelity, I think is what we're trying to build on V0, to the point where you can go to a website and you can say like, hey, as a PM or as a designer, I want to change the header here, and actually change it in the next 2 seconds and push it to production in the next 5. That's kind of like what I think would be like the superpower. And then extending that to other tools beyond just web apps would be super cool.
Agreed. How about you, Laurie?
I think there's a lot of sort of tantalizing promise in the various front-end design tools like Lovable and V0 that at the moment at least sort of peters out when you're like, and I need you to build the back end, and I need you to understand the back end as well, and I need this thing to have a database, and I need it to connect to these other things. Like they can do the front end or they can do the back end, and there's not a lot of tools that can do both at the same time. And I'm if I could get somebody to really nail that, that's what I'd want them to do.
And they don't use Axios.
And they don't use Axios.
I'm here, man. I'm here.
What about you, Nona, to wrap us up?
I think maybe that something that would help me review all the AI
That
output.
makes sense.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
go back to that.
That's like super agent.
Yeah.
All right. That is all we had. Thank you so much for joining.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.